All right, so, we're diving into something today that uh, a lot of people just don't like to talk about.
Yeah.
And, it's understandable why. We're going to be talking about the right to bear arms
Right.
in America.
Yeah.
And, we found this video, and it's really interesting. The video itself is really well done, but what we found is just so interesting is that a lot of people
Right.
didn't even want to talk about this video.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we thought, well, let's deep dive into this. Let's see why this is such a sensitive topic and what we can learn from those reactions.
Well, it's interesting because, I think a lot of times, even the mention of guns or gun ownership is enough to just like shut down a conversation.
Yeah, it's like you hit a wall.
Yeah.
Like as soon as it's mentioned, that's it.
Yeah. And I think, that's a big part of what makes it so sensitive, right? Is that there's this immediate reaction,
Right.
and people are reluctant to even engage.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, you have to remember that the Second Amendment,
It is so deeply intertwined with American identity for a lot of people. The right to own a gun is really connected to this idea of freedom, of self-reliance.
it's like in our DNA almost as a country.
Right, exactly. And historically, if you think back to the founding of the country,
Yeah.
people were fighting for their independence, and they needed to be armed to do that.
Right.
So guns were a big part of that, becoming a nation.
So it's not just about the gun, it's about what it represents.
Exactly.
Like you said, that freedom.
It's symbolic, yeah. And so when you start talking about things like gun control,
Right.
even if you're coming at it from a place of like, wanting to reduce violence,
All right.
it can be perceived as an attack on those values.
Makes sense.
Right. And so it becomes very personal.
Yeah. But it's hard to ignore, like you said, the intention, but it's hard to ignore the fact that, we've had so many tragedies, especially recently,
Right.
with gun violence, mass shootings.
School shootings.
Yeah.
And I think those obviously add another layer of complexity to the whole conversation.
Absolutely.
Because it's really hard to talk about, the Second Amendment and gun rights when,
Right.
we're all dealing with the trauma of
Yeah.
these really awful events.
Yeah. Those events weigh so heavily on everyone's mind, and it's understandable that for a lot of people it creates fear, it creates anxiety.
Yeah.
Just the topic itself can be re-traumatizing.
Especially for those who have, actually experienced gun violence firsthand or lost loved ones.
Exactly.
It's not an abstract thing for them. And then on top of that, you have to layer in, the political divide. It feels like, gun rights have become such a polarizing issue.
Yeah.
You're either kind of pro-gun or you're for gun control. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of middle ground.
Yeah. And it's really become, I think, a central issue, a dividing line in our political landscape. And, the source material that we were looking at actually talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
They talked about how, conservatives often see gun ownership as a symbol of liberty, like we were saying, protection against government overreach. And then, liberals, on the other hand, they tend to prioritize stricter control to reduce violence and, kind of make communities safer. And so it's this polarization.
It's like two totally different ways of looking at it.
Right. And it makes it so hard to even have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. You almost don't even want to bring it up.
Right.
Because it's going to turn into this big political debate.
It's like, how do you even find common ground?
Right. It's almost, and I don't know if you agree with this, but it feels like going back to those reactions to the video, it's almost like gun control is just this taboo subject for some people.
Yeah.
It's like talking about religion or family.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
It's like you just don't do it.
It's like there's this line you don't cross. And, I think that's what we're seeing in those reactions to the video, right?
Yeah,
like you said, people were like, you shouldn't talk about this.
Right.
This is too sensitive. Stay away from it.
It's like there's this fear around it. So we've got history, we've got identity, we've got trauma, politics.
Yeah.
This fear of even talking about it.
Right.
Is no wonder people are just like, whoa.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a perfect storm of all these different factors that make it so sensitive and so complex.
Yeah. I feel like even just, going through this, deep dive today, it's helped me understand why it's not just this black and white issue.
It's so much more nuanced.
Right.
And it really raises the question, if it's so hard to even talk about it, how do we address it?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right. How do we have productive conversations, even if we disagree? How do we even begin to find solutions?
It's definitely a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Well, we've just taken a deep dive into one of the, like you said, most sensitive topics in American society.
Hmm.
Um, I hope, our listeners out there will take this as a starting point to keep, exploring, keep asking questions,
Yeah.
and keep those conversations going, even if they are uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Because, that's how we learn and grow, right?
Absolutely.
Well, this has been really insightful. I appreciate you walking us through all of this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
See ya.